I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to your Innovation Technology General Services Committee. I'm joined by my colleague, Councilmember O'Farrell. Councilmember Bonin will not be attending this hearing. We had this situation where we have this hearing and the T Committee happening at the same time because we had to reschedule, and this is a special hearing because of the combination of the break and the budget coming up where we're going to be moving with the budget. So we, on behalf of Mr. Bonin, I'm sorry that he's not able to be here for this meeting, but he joins us in spirit. So we will, and possibly he could run over any second if his meeting gets finished early. But we're gonna press on. So let's begin. Mr. Villanueva, are there any general public comment cards?
We don't have any, sir.
Great. Okay. Then, unless there's an objection from my colleague, Mr. O'Farrell, I'm going to recommend that items 1, 2, and 4 be approved on consent.
No objections.
Okay, without objection, that is ordered. 1, 2, and 4 are approved on consent. And we are going to move directly to item number 3.
Item number 3 is a general...
Use my gavel, but I get some, all right. Item 3.
Item number 3 is the General Services Department, Information Technology Agency, Los Angeles Police Department, and Los Angeles Fire Department's joint report relative to the upgrade and replacement of the city's current vehicle management system.
Thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
So basically, this is a report. Angela Sheriff, right, with the Department of General Services. So this is a report back to a report that we made to this committee about a year ago. So in the way of background, I'll go ahead and just kind of go over what we've been through to get to this point. So on June 5th, 2012, the City Council instructed the Department of General Services and the CAO with input from the Los Angeles Police Department and ITA to report back on the options to upgrade the vehicle management system. On February 12th, 2013, the departments reported back to this committee with a preliminary report outlining the cost, staffing to purchase the system, implementation for the vehicle management system, the motor pool system, and the fuel management system. The original report in February 2013 included an implementation plan that tasked the vendor with hosting VMS for 16 months, and then ITA taking over after that time period. However, the plan submitted by the vendor did not include the security requirements needed by LAPD. Once LAPD's requirements were included in the cost, the system increased by about $1.5 million, resulting in exceeding the budget. To reduce the hosting cost, the departments reviewed several options and determined that the most cost-effective strategy for hosting the system would be to have ITA host the system from the beginning of the project. This strategy would address LAPD's security concerns and provide a substantial savings. Concurrent to submitting the report to ITGS, GSD completed a budget request for fiscal year 13-14 for $3.1 million, which was the cost originally submitted by the vendor. This budget request was approved, so we currently have $3.1 million in the unappropriated balance. Let's see. The budget request did not include any funding for positions or some of the equipment that will be required for the system to go forward. The report that you have before you today is a comprehensive 3-year phase project implementation plan. The cost proposal for implementation without city staffing is $2.9 million, which includes a 50% discount for software. The departments already have the $3.1 million, which I spoke about previously in the unappropriated balance. However, an additional cost for ITA hosting will be required, and that's about $587,000. And there will also be costs for GSD, LAPD, and LAFD for staffing. The departments have requested positions for this project through the budget process, but none of those positions were approved. If this committee determines that the report will not be approved due to the request for positions, then the departments would request that the $3.1 million be reappropriated to next year in the unappropriated balance. So that's kind of where we are based on what we've done for basically a 2-year period. So we started this back in June of 2012 with a collaboration between all of the departments, and we all agree that this is the way that we should go forward.
And has any of the $3.1 million been expended so far?
It has not been.
Did you all want to make additional comments before you?
No, Maggie Goodrich, I'm the CIO for the LAPD. I'm just here in case there are questions for
the police department.
Ted Ross, Assistant General Manager with ITA, same when it came to the hosting discussion.
And tell me with the timeline how this came, because it seems like we were chugging along and then all of a sudden we found out, wait, this can't work. Why didn't we know that in advance?
Well, what happened was when we first got the request or the direction from council to start work on the project, we did that. And we started meeting with the vendor. The vendor did not include the security requirements for LAPD, and so we went back and had those requirements included. And so that's where we kind of ran into a little bit of an issue with a budget problem.
So I think as requirements were starting to be gathered, and I could speak from the ITA perspective, General Services did a very good job of collaborating, bringing the departments in, and really running down to see what the new system would be. Because it's replacing an existing legacy mainframe application with a much more modern, what they call M5 application. And so as they started to identify and walk through a lot more of the requirements, they identified that off-site hosting would be significantly much more expensive because there is critical information related to LAPD that you would not want to manage off-site with a certain vendor. So as they identified that, then they identified some additional costs. And also as they identified some of the other requirements, they identified that it would be a lot more difficult to fit within the existing scope.
And so if we did go with an outside vendor, the cost would be much bigger, I would assume.
That's correct.
What type of order of magnitude are we talking about?
So attachment 1 in the VMS report shows that if AssetWorks, which is the vendor that implements and manages the software, if they were to host it, then we would be looking across 3 years at about $2.1 million. If it were done through ITA, then across 3 years it would be about $1.3 million. So it's substantially more expensive for it to be hosted off-site, mainly because of the security requirements around LAPD.
Now, the 1.3 million is a different number than the 2.9 million that you were talking about. What's the delta?
So this is about hosting specifically,
Just
hosting
Just
and
hosting.
managing the software, yes.
The $2.9 million is basically for the implementation and the software that the vendor would provide to start the system up. However, that does not include any hosting, which we are requesting that ITA provide.
We deliver the same type of hosting for multiple other applications, so LAPD is very comfortable with the services we provide.
And so the alternative at this point, since that's not going to work for this year, is to limp along basically the way we've been doing it for the last couple of years. And is there, what's the downside to that?
Well, I think the downside is, of course, we don't get the benefits of the new system. However, the system that we have in place can work. It's a legacy system, and we have a real concern about continuing it over time. So this system was originally installed in 1996, and we have been working with the vendor, but we have something called MCMS. The vendor is now at M5. So they've gone through M1, 2, 3, 4, and now they're at 5. And so our concern is that over time, the vendor's going to move on, and we won't have the expertise to actually run the system. So that's another reason why we would want ITA to be a host, because with city systems, generally, we find that it takes a long time for us to kind of keep up. And if we have the expertise on board, we won't have to have those kind of concerns in the future. If we don't upgrade the system for another 15 years, we would still have ITA expertise to help us with the system.
And from a little more peripheral perspective, MCMS is a mainframe application, so we've been taking a lot of efforts to migrate our mainframe applications off to what's called a distributed platform. Ultimately, once we can get all mainframe applications off, then we're looking at substantial savings for the City of LA. So we also have a vested interest in trying to eliminate yet another mainframe application.
That's more
No, I think you've asked all the questions. Just maybe how much longer, when will this all come to some sort of conclusion where we need to make a firm decision? How much longer can we kick this down the road?
Well, we're hoping that we can make a firm decision next year through the budget process. What we're requesting to do is move the funding that we currently have in the unappropriated balance, move it to next year, put it in the unappropriated balance again, and then have the departments actually come in with budget requests for positions. We know that this year we tried that, and none of the positions that the departments tried to include in the budget were approved. In fact, some positions were cut. So as a result, we're hoping that if we can move the money to the unappropriated balance for next year, we would all come in with position request, and we would go from there. And we have discussed this with the vendor with regards to the 50% discount, because one of the things that the vendor wanted to do was give this a 50% discount because we were expediting the project. So I had discussions with them, and they have agreed to continue that 50% discount even if we go into next year.
And are a lot of other municipalities in the same boat as us?
And I think that's why the vendor has looked at it that way, because they've run into this problem with other municipalities, not being able to get the funding to go forward on these upgrades.
Thank you.
Well, my recommendation would be that we continue this item. We're going to wait to see what happens with the budget process, but I think it's good that we get the information out and talk about it today, so thank you. So without objection, we'll continue the item.
No objection?
Okay. Then our next item is, we said it was 4, so our next item is number 5.
Item number 5 is a CAO report relative to an agreement between the city and Akia Inc. to implement web content management platform Drupal and provide hosting services for the city website. We do not have any public cards on this item.
Well, welcome.
Good afternoon, Ted Ross, Assistant General Manager with ITA. You'll see a little bit of me over the next set of items. So.
You didn't have to get up or
I
anything?
didn't have to get up. I made sure to bring everything up with me. So to give a little bit of background, the city uses a content management system, and what that means is for websites, it's a system that allows users to very easily update content. So ITA can create templates for websites that ITA manages, which is 25 total. It will create templates that allow users to update the information so you're not always emailing to someone and having some kind of web administrator do it. It's a very important component of how we manage the websites, which includes lacity.org, LA City View, DOT's website, and another 22 on top of that. Our existing content management system, and I'm sure you're used to this as a running theme, is very old. And so it's over 10 years old. It's an Oracle Stellent content management system. And if you could imagine, a lot has changed in the World Wide Web over the last 10 years. So technology moves quickly, and it moves very quickly when it comes to web services. So we've had a lot of issues when it came to our existing Stellent content management system. A lot of lack of functionality, so folks would ask for various functions. Can my website do this? Can my website do that? All too often I have to say, unfortunately, no, we don't have the technology. We've got great staff, but we don't have the technology. And it even includes various support issues. So the Stellent application requires versions of Microsoft Internet Explorer 7 and older. So if you can imagine, we're on IE 11 currently. It requires 7 and older. So as we deal with things like XP migration and these other types of aspects, we are forcing our customers to utilize old applications and old software to try to support it. So it's given us a lot of issues when it came to the support around it. So needless to say, we've known for some time that we need to replace it. So we started up last year a citywide IT committee. So we brought in multiple departments who all had a vested interest, and we reviewed a lot of the types of applications, the content management systems that were out there. To make a long story short, there was effectively unanimous agreement around an open source software called Drupal. I know it's a funny name, and often nowadays software ends up with funny names. It's really, I think, based on another language, and it means drop. And so Drupal is actually a very popular open source system. It has, as of February, over 1 million websites worldwide already running on the Drupal system. It's a highly successful platform. So, good examples, City of Austin. So the Best of the Web winner last year, so we're familiar with the Best of the Web award. The Best of the Web winner was City of Austin last year, and they use Drupal to manage their website. It also includes Bay Area Rapid Transit. It includes the White House, U.S. Department of Transportation, FEMA, TSA. There's quite a few government organizations and a whole lot of private sector organizations. NFL, NCAA, Mercedes-Benz, Federal Express, Zappos, LinkedIn, these are all running on the Drupal content management system. So it's a very proven open source software that's been around for quite a bit of time. So when it came to the city implementing it, it was a great open source, right? But we still had to identify someone who could implement, someone who could help us transition off of our existing 25 websites into the Drupal platform. As well as we need to find someone who was experienced in that for government organizations. As well as we had to identify someone who could help us with knowledge transfer. We didn't want to pay a contractor to migrate all 25, and then we're left not knowing how to do it. So we want to identify a strategy where they can help us with the mission critical ones while we learn with them, and then we can manage, let's say, the remaining 22 on our own. as well as someone who could help us with hosting services. We've had substantial outages with things like lacity.org, which has millions of annual visitors. And so we had large outages in that when it came to maintaining and keeping the site up, as well as disaster recovery. We live in an era now where a website is a part of our emergency response. As things go down and we have large types of disasters, earthquake, whatever it may be, people look to things like web, they look to mobile, they look to these other devices to communicate out to the city. So it became important for us to identify a way of hosting this off-site. We looked to Bay Area Rapid Transit, which recently did an RFP on exactly the same requirements, and they have a very complex and important website that they use to manage it. And they had one respondent, which is a company called Acquia. And so Acquia is very well known. In fact, the founder of Drupal, whose name is Dries, actually is a manager of Acquia. And so they end up with a long history of Drupal implementation, support, et cetera, both in government and in private sector. So through a lot of research and a lot of discussions, they were identified at it, and we identified, once again, BART did their RFP, and it was a competitive process in which they had Acquia as the respondent. So we reached out to Acquia and we negotiated a statement of work around it. So we had a lot of conversations and we spent substantial time to come up with discounted prices. And so what we have is the result of this submission. We also identified and were approved for use of PEG funding for this project. So it became very important for us to identify the source of it. Ultimately, what we're looking at is to solicit their services, to have a high contract ceiling should we need it, both ourselves or any other department who would be leveraging the services for Drupal. We would be implementing for them to come on site and help transition lacity.org, DOT, and LA City View for Channel 35, which are our mission-critical, biggest and most complex websites. We would also factor in knowledge transfer so that our developers would be transitioning the remaining 22. And then they would also provide an off-site support, a low-cost off-site support, and hosting for the long term. So in the first 2 years in which we'd expend most of our effort and money, and it would come down to a significantly less expensive third year and beyond approach for supporting it. I know I covered a lot in there, but please let me know.
All right. So they would be hosting for, we're paying for how many years of hosting?
So
For the contract, Betty from ITA, may
yes,
I?
absolutely.
For the contract, we're asking for a 10-year, so it will be the 10-year hosting, and then we have an option to renewal and negotiate the price after the 10 years.
So we've priced out 10 years. We're committing to a 3-year contract plus requesting 1-year approvals after that, 1-year authorization.
For a maximum of 10 years.
Maximum of 10 years.
So we're locked in on the price for 10 years.
We have price locked in for 10 years. That's the negotiated price. And we had a lot of discussions with City Attorney, CAO, and others because a few items. First of all, it's an open source software, so it's something relatively new from the city's perspective. Right. However, certainly it's been established in private sector and public sector around. So a lot of those negotiations were uniquely different. But secondly, we've had very strong negotiations with them because we don't want to be locked in and see price increases in a variety of other aspects. The city websites are an extremely important facet of how we communicate to our constituents. And so we need to, A, modernize to get into something where we can actually deliver better functions and better capabilities, and B, stabilize. And this fully satisfies that.
And we're using PEG money, right?
Yes. That's
PEG
a very
money,
important point.
PEG money can pay for sort of the capital expense, but they can't pay for the maintenance, right?
No, that's why on the first 2 years, when we develop and implement the 3 critical websites, we use PEG money to support the project. And then on the 3rd year, ITA is planning to submit a budget request to pay for the ongoing hosting fee of that. And then for the future website development, maybe we can explore into taking the advantage of remaining PEG funding and supporting ITA and the rest of the city families to use the infrastructure that we have already established.
Our general approach to it is it would be basically implementing for 2 years. And then from that forth, we'd be going on to annual hosting and maintenance unless we're building other items. And we feel it's very important from the ITA perspective that we create an excellent product so that we can then start to establish other opportunities for other departments to be able to leverage the product.
Well, and the more you can front load in implementing and have PEG funding pay for,
Correct.
the less general fund it's going to cost us down the road.
And Betty knows that I've had this conversation many times. I said, ultimately, when it comes down to it, it's extremely important to me, the bottom line of how this could impact general fund going down the road. So that was the area in which we were the most aggressive, so that we wouldn't be on the hook for a bill that the general fund would have to pick up.
Right. And during our negotiation, we were able to have Aqua to give us a very good discount. The rate that the city has is 25% lower than the GSA rate, and compared to the BART rate, we get about 48% discount. So on the annual hosting, they have agreed to give us not the price increase for the first 5 years, and for the remaining 5 years, it would be a maximum 5% increase on the hosting.
And this also, we didn't include in it savings associated with no longer hosting this on site. So that is a savings in salaries, it's a savings in hardware, licensing, et cetera, as opposed to managing this on site.
Right.
How much of savings is that?
So that one we haven't identified and drilled through the numbers as firmly as we'd like, but certainly we could try to identify information around that.
I mean, we're not saving enough that we're making money on this, are we?
One of our issues always when it comes down to is we've already invested in hardware, so the savings will come when there's a time to refresh that hardware.
Yeah.
And so,
And I'm all for that. Don't get me wrong. But, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, make sure I understand. So, migration and maintenance to Drupal and of Drupal will be totally PEG funded for 3 years?
Yes.
Is that basically correct?
For the first 2 years.
For the first 2?
Yes.
yes.
All right, and then after that, about what cost per year will there be that we need to start thinking of?
For the annual hosting, if we stay with the small tier, then it costs about $90,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go up to the medium tiers, then it costs about $200,000 per year. So that's pretty much the annual hosting fee that we're looking to apply budget for.
For the contract, for the
Right.
10-year contract?
starting
Yes.
year 3.
Okay, thank you.
Well, unless there's additional questions, I'm prepared for us to adopt the CAO recommendation.
As am I.
Okay, so without objection, that is order. Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're moving on. We're making speedy progress here. We're moving on to item 6. Mr. Villanueva.
Item number 6 is an Information Technology
Sorry.
Oversight Committee report relative to a contract amendment with CGI Technologies and Solution, Inc. for the Envision Part 2 of the Supply Management System Replacement Project. We don't have any cards for this item.
Hello again, Ted Ross, Information Technology Agency. I'm also joined by Todd Boo with the Controller's Office and John Trevgoda from General Services. So to provide just a little bit of background, SMS certainly is the citywide procurement system for materials and supplies, processing upwards of $500 million a year for the city when it comes to ordering of materials and supplies. Since 2008, there's been significant issues with the supply management system, and especially its interface with the city's financial system. In March 2013, ITOC, the IT Oversight Committee, requested General Services and ITA and Controller to come up with long-term strategies for that existing, it's an Oracle PeopleSoft system. So we had subsequent reports, and in May 2003, it was requested for us to A, freeze the existing SMS system, which is to limit any changes and modifications to it, and B, start what they called an Envision Phase 1 for the replacement of that system using a module of the city's financial management system. So in the course of that process, in that Envision Part 1, and so once again, this is a little bit of a history lesson, between September and February of this last year up into this year is when we performed this Envision Part 1 effort. So we leveraged savings from support of the SMS system, and we started it to start to really ratchet down, in a little reference to what we were hearing before with the vehicle management system, to ratchet down the requirements of the system, to ratchet down interface requirements. It's a very complicated $20+ million system, the SMS system, and so we had to ratchet down all the requirements, all the business scenarios, all the interfaces, technical requirements, etc. So that work completed in the February timeframe with our partner CGI. The results of which are shown in the report. So there were 15 discovery sessions with about 100+ city users. So we included not just General Services, but all sorts of users from across the city. And we We had 16-plus prototyping sessions with 40 folks doing hands-on work. There were 38 separate procurement and inventory processes that were documented, and it ended up with 217 identified detailed requirements of what the system needs to do. So once again, this is doing substantial and detailed documentation for replacing the existing SMS system. The results of which was a 280-page fit gap report, which I did not carry with me for all of these different reports, but I've got it right over there. And the results of which identified an 86% fit, which means that 86% of the city's requirements are fully met by the off-the-shelf CGI FMS procurement system, which is certainly a very good number. Of the rest, 5% are identified as resolved through a customization. We try to limit customizations for these off-the-shelf systems, but there are some key items that were identified by general services and others, so 5% is resolved through there. And about 9% is comprised in what we call additional deep dives. These were items that there was no way we could, for the existing engagement of Envision Part 1, be able to drill in there, get the additional working sessions, and drive into it. A little side note, we always knew there would be an Envision Part 1, and then there would be an Envision Part 2. So we went back to iTalk, and we showed them the results of the Envision Part 1. And we requested, we had a consensus, both among controller, general services, and the others that were involved, that it would be very important for us to continue the ball rolling with an Envision Part 2. So as opposed to waiting until a July timeframe, which we initially expected, to continue that process for a variety of reasons. Number one, we've got existing staff on site who've spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours running through these details, learning the system, and becoming aware to be able to fully establish and analyze the system for the build. Number two, it became extremely important because we want to hit, if the city so budgets it through the budget, we've seen that there is the mayor has included in the unappropriated balance $6 million for an SMS replacement system. We want to hit a July 2016 go live. So it's very important to us that we are on time and on track with it. Of course, we knew funding would be an issue, so we are actually partnered up, General Services Controller and ITA. We partnered up and identified savings in each of our departments that we would be putting together out of existing funding to be able to pay for an Envision Part 2 contract amendment. So on page 3 of the report is where it starts to detail what an Envision Part 2 would do, which involves hands-on analysis and prototyping. So for a lot of the key areas in which vendor self-service and inventory, et cetera, we're actually bringing up the system, testing of the system, and allowing users to drill into it to further detail requirements for a build. It's a necessary step for building the system. We also were to cover some of the deferred prototyping items. So that's that 9% that requires the deep dive. That would also be an Envision Part 2. We were tackling things regarding vendor creation and maintenance. Currently, supply vendors, or say services vendors, are in one city system, and supply and material vendors are in another city system. For an implementation of an FMS procurement, we need to integrate all of those tens of thousands of vendors into one system. So we only have one IBM, and we only have one small business, or whoever they may be. And so these are the types of analysis on how to do it that would be included in Envision Part 2. It also includes service contract prototyping. And so this would mean that the service contract itself gets entered into the system in an appropriate manner. So it's what's called the purchasing document. Currently, we call it an accounting document. We use it as a contract sealing. So we have a lot of limited functionality currently in our financial system. So this would be bringing that in-house. It also cover e-procurement. General Services initially sees some substantial savings in replacing their existing e-procurement system with some of the systems that they have identified here, but it requires additional deep dive analysis, et cetera, as well as a much further implementation analysis document. So effectively, Envision Part 2 will be the completion of our systems design and analysis phase for a very complicated, very large system. So we felt it was very important to accelerate that effort, and that's why we're submitting this contract amendment using existing funding around that. I know, once again, a mouthful.
No, it's a lot of stuff, but good stuff. That you talked about the savings, that could be achieved through something. Have you quantified that in any way?
We can approach savings in a number of ways. Number one, we're looking at business process improvement. So we've been partnering with the Mayor's Office, General Services, Bureau of Contract Administration, and others, and they're looking at a potential phase. It's outside of the scope of this discussion, but they're looking at a phase to bring in and identify some key business process improvements in city purchasing. Those items could have a huge amount of savings. So that's a in-progress discussion. Secondly, around the system itself, there's functionality that one can pull in. We have currently one financial system that does a lot of good things. This would be adding another module onto it. So we're looking at potential savings around the support and the maintenance and the infrastructure of having one system instead of two very large systems. When it comes to the e-procurement itself, John, I'm not sure if you want to speak into it. Once again, nothing's detailed, nothing's documented, but you saw some potential items that were in the off-the-shelf system that are currently being paid for.
Right, John Tricotta with General Services. Sorry, Ted.
Sure.
We do pay for a third-party service that satisfies our e-procurement needs. Again, we're still scratching the surface with CGI Advantage, but the preliminary indications indicate that we may be able to replace our existing third-party service and do everything within the ERP service, so we could do away with that extra licensing cost. I don't recall the exact dollar amount off the top of my head, so I'd hate to speculate, but there'd be some minimal savings.
But Mr. Chairman, to your point, certainly as a part of project documentation, we're going to start to do some additional analysis and start to identify where real cost savings are being made. At this point, it's still seen as a project that's in an assessment phase, and so just recently we see a mayor's budget that includes some money towards it, et cetera. So it's very important for us to kind of be in this planning and design aspect. But yes, I think I'm sensing the point. It's very important for us to be able to document and identify where savings or improvements are truly being made when we implement these large types of projects.
Right. And I realize some of them are not quantifiable. I mean, the ease in which we can carry out our business and do these things, and that doesn't necessarily translate directly into dollars and cents, but getting rid of a third party intermediary for e-procurement, I mean that clearly does, but you said it's minimal. So I would just love to see on this and on other things a real good quantification, because I think that makes it easier to sell this when it comes time, budget time.
Agreed.
And for other similar upgrades, when we start showing that there's a pattern here, that we're doing these things not just to get the latest, shiniest, fanciest system,
Correct.
but we're doing it to make the city work better, but also ultimately that we save money. And maybe toward that end, toward the, not so much the money end, but the need for it, if you could talk a little bit about sort of the downside. If we didn't do this, if we just limped along, what are some of the capability, what are some of the problems that we would run into in the near future, and spell some of those out.
The existing SMS system does some things well, but in many other ways it's had substantial issues. So number one, it is an end-of-life system. It's unsupported by Oracle. So this is a system in which if we pick up the phone, we were to call Oracle and say we have a problem, they won't answer it because we're on an older version. It also doesn't have all the different types of patches that it requires. So it's not a system that we can sustain or maintain. Number two, there have been significant issues, especially when it comes to the interface. So every fiscal year end, both General Services and Controller and ITA are very familiar with a very painful year-end reconciliation process that, and in some years past, if not done as successfully as it should be, end up as an audit result from our external auditor. They say they want to qualify the opinion they gave because they have issues with the financial results of what's coming out of that system. So that was an issue in the past that we've been working very hard. So extremely labor intensive to balance the books at fiscal year end. There's also substantial savings that could be associated with that. We already have an existing infrastructure that supports our financial management system, and we also have a separate team that ends up supporting the supply management system. Adding one more module into the financial management system can lead into a lot of we are centralizing the support into one system as opposed to it being spread across two, including even just from a department user perspective. If I'm a user, I need to learn two completely separate systems. However, folks who are already used to using the current accounting system will be very familiar with how to process purchasing out of it also. So it just makes life a lot easier for departments. It brings centralized reporting. So currently, detail reporting is in one system, summarized reporting is in a second system. So the departments see a lot of benefits to it, as well as there's a lot of downside, and that's why IT Oversight Committee recommended that we freeze the existing SMS system. We try to limit any changes, and we've already been transferring over to identifying third-party support because we can't get it through Oracle. So this is a system that we shouldn't tinker with anymore, and we are already in, for lack of a better term, a burning platform. We have to get off of it, and we have to replace it.
One more thing to add to Ted's comments. The current interface today does not provide for real-time budget information between the FMS system and SMS. So there is that lag, and there is the possibility for potential cost overruns, which causes all sorts of problems. So having that real-time budget information would certainly eliminate a lot of confusion and help give real-time reporting capabilities on spend reports, so the CEO or anybody can go in and look and see exactly what's being spent by each department. More questions, Mr. Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, you mentioned third-party e-contract, right?
E-procurement.
E-procurement. So, e-procurement contract. So how much longer are we under that contract?
That's an annual.
Annually renewed?
Correct.
All right, so we would be able to just end that once we upgraded?
That's correct.
And how much, what's the savings in that?
If I recall correctly, it was in the $300,000 range.
Okay, there's a good savings. And then in relation to the $346,800 cost will be with existing funds, not from the general fund, no general fund impact.
So we're leveraging existing savings. So for example, on the ITA side, we've been having a very difficult time getting a contract DBA. So we've been having difficulties getting this contractor on board. So we actually have savings in our current budget that we would leverage towards this. And so the other departments have other areas in which they've identified savings. And once again, the Envision Part 2 was anticipated for starting next fiscal year, the beginning of next fiscal year. So this isn't something above and beyond the project. This is something we're accelerating a piece of the project so that we can get our most bang for the buck and be on track for a successful implementation.
And do you see it being up and running sometime early in the next fiscal year?
So if this is a large multi-year project, and so July 2016 is the current target.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, once again, it's subject to project plan timing, funding, a lot of good, I know there's a lot of big conversations around it. I hate to caution it. We've all seen with federal websites, we've all seen with LAUSD payroll, we could always name a large number of, tens of millions of dollar failures. Both the ITA, controller, GSD, we're all about sticking to budget, implementing on time an effective system for the city of LA. We were successful on it with FMS, and we want to continue that success. And we're always very mindful because we know there's always that daunting reputation around government IT projects. And so we are fiercely determined to ensure that that doesn't happen under our watch. So that's why you can see we're very passionate regarding documentation, bringing in various departments, implementing a key system that is effective and efficient for the city.
What kind of budget ask, if at all, would you have in fiscal 15-16?
So we have a submission for the entire project of $6.9 million of contractual services already submitted, and the mayor's office has submitted and published in their budget about $6 million in the unappropriated balance.
Each department, Todd Bowie, City Controller's Office, each department has also submitted a request for equipment and staffing as well, in addition to the amount identified there for contractual services.
We're very familiar of many other government agencies. So, for example, the County of Los Angeles is already implemented the system that we're turning on. But many other government agencies are spending upwards of $25 to $100 million on their procurement systems. And so CGI has been very cost effective. And since we already own the financial system and we already are licensed for the procurement part of it, it's already something we own. We're paying for contractual services to come and help configure, turn it on, and allow us to use it. That's why it's such a cost-effective solution to do this.
Thank you.
The thing I worry about is that 9% deep dive. You said the 5% customization is expensive, and then there's this 9% that can't figure out if we need to customize or if there's there's a way to sort of rejigger what we're asking for, but it seems like it's always the last mile that's the most expensive, so to speak, and the last 9% that especially if I'm assuming those are mission critical type of things.
Well, we leverage a lot of governance around this. So we're very critical as departments when it comes to any customization, because customization is you pay for it once and then you end up paying for it again as you're maintaining and trying to upgrade, et cetera. So we're very aggressive to limit customizations, but we also we have monthly steering committees around this project. We also go ahead and report back to ITOC, the IT Oversight Committee. So we want to be very aggressive about limiting this, because I completely agree the devil's in the details. And when I see something like that 9%, we do not expect it to be substantial customizations coming out of it, but we're wary like you are, and so it's very important to us.
And I'll just echo that. All three departments are committed to making this as vanilla as possible. So we want to try to keep the customizations to a minimum.
Well, my recommendation is we move forward and adopt the ITOC joint report recommendations, and we'll follow it closely as it moves forward. So without objection, that's so ordered.
Thank you.
And we'll move to our final item, item number 7.
Item number 7 is a CEO report relative to an agreement between the city and Socrata, Inc. for the development and implementation of a citywide open data portal.
Hello again. Ted Ross, Information
Like
Technology.
you haven't even moved.
I've joked with the other managers and staff, easily a year of my life is identified in your agenda today, for what it's worth. So, so cut me off if you heard this one. I feel like I'm telling an old joke.
Please.
Socrata and open data. So our chairman is even quite familiar with it, because he even got the opportunity to speak with us at an open data kickoff just recently. But open data is something I'm very excited about. It's been a movement in government that's leveraging newer technology that's come out in the last 4 to 6 years, that gives us a lot more hardware and a lot more computing power, and it gives governments the opportunity to make data available to private sector, to nonprofits, to hackers, to developers, and even across city departments. It's a very powerful movement that's been occurring in a lot of major municipalities. The intent of it, of course, is to be able to make our government more efficient, so it improves cross-department data sharing, and also reduces public information requests, so as people ask for information from us, we have the information posted and readily available and easily accessible for them. It has improvements that allows people to innovate using our data. The reality is, and some of the folks have already heard me say it, one of government's greatest assets, something that we uniquely have that the private sector doesn't, is its data. So long as we're not providing anything that is private or is sensitive or is illegal for us to share, making our data available for private sector nonprofits and others to innovate is an extremely powerful and effective public-private partnership, and something that we really look to foster. Council echoed this with the then council member Garcetti last year with the council motion in regards to identifying and piloting an open data site. There was a pilot occurred in June of 2013 last year, and another pilot IT supported in December of last year, leveraging different tools and researching and seeing where we feel open data works and maybe where it doesn't. You could be very heavy-handed as a city. You could spend tens of millions if you want on it. Or you can kind of hit that sweet spot where you spend a very nominal amount of money and get great effect out of it. And so we've been learning a lot over the last year around it. And then, of course, in December of 2013, was a mayor's executive directive around it, instructing departments to work with ITA to create a central portal. So we leveraged the experiences of folks like the Controller's Office, who launched a control panel using the Socrata site. We pulled together an open data steering committee in which we had multiple council members and the mayor's office and others, and met with the city departments. We created an IT policy around it. So we did a lot of effort to make sure that we're as collaborative as possible and that we were really thinking before we step. Got information feedback from city attorney and others so that we knew what is lawful to publish and what is not lawful to publish. So we've been doing a lot of discussions, once again, hundreds plus of hours of effort to really try to think through on this. What became very important was identifying the right tool, and so Socrata is the product used by the vast majority of large cities: New York City, Chicago, Baltimore, Seattle, San Francisco. Federal government utilizes it. It is the platform used for it. And it's used for a variety of reasons. I don't own any stock, but it's something I've observed. Number one, not only do they allow you to do this standard, what they call APIs or interfaces, to extract the data. So someone who creates a web application or a mobile app can extract the data automatically through interfaces. But they also allow a very easy look and feel for you to navigate. You can click on it, and anyone who's seen the control panel system can see you can click on different fields and see graphs and charts and allow yourself to kind of work it. So if you have basic Microsoft Excel skills, you can create visualizations quite easy. And anyone who has an issue with it can actually use Socrata resources to learn how to do it through online demonstrations. So it provides something for the average Joe Q public, so to speak, as well as it provides something for developers. And it is the common platform. In addition, it also allows comparability. By us using a Socrata platform, it allows us to compare ourselves much better with a Chicago and New York City, et cetera. It's a hosted solution, so we're not asking for any hardware. We're not asking for any other licensing. I'm not asking for any staffing at this point. It's something which we've come up with a policy and a plan in which departments as well as ITA are loading. We're being trained and we're loading how to load these data sets, and we make it available and we could leverage it. We're also going to be trying to pull together training for council offices so we could train your staff how to access, review this data, create visualizations, and even put them onto your own websites. So we see it as a substantial culture change for the better. So long as we do this wisely and we put the right types of data and we don't step on any landmines, so we certainly partner with Mayor's Office, City Attorney, Controller, et cetera. So long as we do that, we feel that departments can, for a relatively nominal amount of money, get a lot of capability that would improve their operations as well as improve our engagement of the public.
I mean, something I'm very excited about, this open data movement in general and how we're going to take that next step. And we're already up and running on the financial side, and it's very exciting. Maybe you want to talk about some of the data sets, just so our viewing public will have a better appreciation of some of that we're looking at.
Sure, I can speak to that. I'm Carter Rubin from the Mayor's Office of Budget and Innovation. So part of our collaboration with the departments up to this point has been around identifying the types of data sets that we want to make sure the public and the other departments have access to. So a lot of that is geographic information, so the location of municipal facilities throughout the city, and that's also information on our vehicle fleet, the different types of work that our departments are doing, like building and safety code enforcement complaints. It's the data set that they have identified that we could map that so people in their community could see locations of code violations in their neighborhood. The police department is going to share crime data with us, so they have a data set, 6 months rolling, showing geographic locations and the types of crimes around the neighborhoods. So you could see the applications of towards empowering community members to understand what's going on in their community, or empowering departments. For instance, we had a conversation with Rec and Parks where they were saying, we'd love to understand better the crime trends going around our park sites, because that's a place where we can take steps to ensure the safety of our patrons or collaborate with LAPD. And now they would have a one-stop shop where they can go onto this online portal and pull up this information, as opposed to having to call 3 different people to try to find out what the right data is and get it off the server. So it's all about creating this centralized portal where all of these different customers can access those data sets.
This is a very effective platform to not only improve what the public has access to, but even department across department. It's actually amazing how much 50% of the benefit is really internal. So for example, the city currently manages a GIS repository for geographic information system information. So we have to invest in licensing, the hardware, and even have a resource to help with that. We're currently in discussions with Bureau of Engineering, Planning, and others to identify using Socrata as our GIS repository. So we would save somewhere between 100 and 150,000 based on our initial estimates. Almost the annual cost of this, just in elimination of a GIS repository. We're still in more discussions, but once again, Bureau of Engineering and others seem very positive that this is something we could actually do using this. So instead of us creating all these different areas in which we have to host and manage data, we could leverage these types of solutions to do the same.
Keep it all in one place. Great. And what's the timeline in terms of when we're thinking of going live?
So, subject to council approval, that we could target a May 31st launch.
one quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Full admission, I haven't gone to the controller's website yet. But my question, that has financial data, does that cover all the departments, all city departments, the financial data on the controller data.lacity.org?
So this contract covers controller, which would be all financial information, as well as any other department. So this is managing the citywide effort. Any department could load and provide data onto it, and as a part of this contract, IT is helping manage that so departments can do it. It could be a cultural affairs, it could be an El Pueblo, it could be a housing, it could be anybody.
And it would all be available or reachable with just one site?
Yes,
Mhm.
all of it reachable through one site, absolutely. It's another very important component. And honestly, the sky is the limit, and so yes, you've seen no ask in regards to staffing, and so it's folks like myself and others kind of double dipping and moonlighting, so to speak, on projects like this, Carter and others, and the mayor's office has dedicated a lot of folks to kind of, once again, moonlight and assist. So the sky is the limit in future of what we can do, but we know it's important for a launch like this to not come and ask you for a bunch of people to try to support it. But the sky is the limit in the sense of how we engage the public, of the types of hackathons and civic development we could do around it. One of the applications I think worth noting that we're working on is what's called the citywide calendar, in which all of the events are being done by various departments can be loaded into this one location. So you can not only view it, but you could also API it. So if someone wanted to say what's going on in LA over in this area or near this park or whatever it may be, it would show that. As well as like a citywide locator. If I'm in a park and I want to create an application that says, I am here, what's close to me? It could show a library. It could show a rec and parks facility. These are all these types of ways of leveraging technology to deliver our services better. And this is a great platform for that.
And something that might be of use to the general public is, could it possibly also communicate pending applications for special events? For example, 13th District, we get them all the time. And recently there was an issue in Hollywood where there were special events all weekend long, but one group didn't know the other group was doing it. And so it created a real issue. Could that be a useful
This system is
piece of
excellent for presentation. So we need to work with the right departments to ensure that they're tracking that information. And then the next step is to get them to submit that information in a timely manner. But this portal is a great way of publishing and demonstrating and showing that information. So if a department is tracking it, generally speaking, then this portal is an excellent way to show it so that people could go and check it out.
And do you envision working with our library system to communicate?
Absolutely. And next week I'm even meeting with the city librarian.
Perfect.
And we're walking through the topic. You happen to mention it.
Great. Thank you.
As one of the choke points is figuring out the appropriate, inappropriate information in terms of the privacy issues.
Yes.
And I know you've been working on sort of a policy document. Is that all finalized?
It's finalized and approved and reviewed by the city attorney.
Okay.
And we have a direct contact with city attorney in regards to other issues that might come out regarding it. So we have a point of contact to go to around that. Because once again, not everything is publishable.
Right.
Many things are, but not everything.
And is that still, and I imagine just sort of getting through that lens is a choke point. Because there's a lot of data out there that we want to get out there, but you need to pass it through that lens of what you can do and what you can't do. Is that automated? Does that still require a lot of...
At some point, it's going to require human judgment. So there's things that we can prescribe. We don't want to see social security numbers of anybody. We don't want to see underage this. We can start listing off HIPAA and FERPA and all these different statutory regulations. Right. But at some point, there could be some things. So what we do is we already have a departmental review process. So anybody in a department IT shop needs to go to the business owner of that data. They can't just take it and load it themselves. So they get an approval internally. Then it goes ahead and they load it to a holding place, and the mayor's office does one final kind of reasonability view. So if there's something they would spot, they have it there. And then we also have an escalation process with city attorney of anything that's questionable. We would be aggregating any data, if necessary, that is sensitive. So many other cities use things like 911 dispatch data and these other types of items. They put it out there. But they don't typically put it out there so that they're violating someone's privacy rights. They'll do it at an aggregate at a block level or an area level so that you can know what's happening in an area without knowing that it happened to Ted Ross, for example.
There are ways to anonymize and aggregate to the point where people's privacy is protected, right?
And a lot of effort's being put in that area.
Yeah, I just worry about, I'm interested how we're going about that, because that seems like it could be the choke point for getting a lot of information up quickly, unless we have some easy way to screen that, and maybe it's a lesser of an issue than I think, and that most of the data is not even going to trigger the first screen that's going to require the human judgment issue.
We have, the departments have volunteered at this point 178 data sets. I'm guessing in the beginning, a lot of it are things that are slam dunks, things that are already published, information that is not so controversial. I think with time, it starts to get more controversial. For what it's worth, departments are usually very good about telling us very quickly, whether it's the Department of Water or Power or whoever it may be, they'll say, this is not something we can publish, this is unacceptable. And they're very clear, and they're usually very good judges of what they know they can put out there or not. But if there's any question, we really try to partner with them to start to walk through that. But at this point, there's a good amount that we can push. I think with time, as constituents start to ask for more information, once there's a launch, then that will start to be an area which they'll start to ask for things that maybe will be more questionable.
Needless to say, I'm going to want to see a lot of this on the, talk about the 311 app and making sure that we're all linked into that. And I know that you're on the same page as that, but I think I'm going to be a broken record on that as we go forward. But that's good. This is great, and excited about this. I'm going to recommend that we adopt the CAO recommendations. So without objection, that is ordered. And is there anything else left on the docket? All right, then. This hearing is hereby adjourned.
Thank you.